Do you feel like you are constantly comparing yourself and your life to others on social media and or in the real life? Do you feel like the fear of judgment that you'll receive from others is often something that either holds you back or pushes you to do things that you don't necessarily want to do? Do you worry that other people are thinking about you and thinking poorly of you? If yes, this is going to be the perfect podcast episode for you, because on today's episode of the No Bullshit Manifestation Show, we're going to be talking about breaking free of the comparison cycle once and for all. What's up, and welcome to the No Bullshit Manifestation Show, the podcast that demystifies all of the nonsense that surrounds manifestation and gives you a realistic view of what it's like to be on a personal, professional, and spiritual growth journey. I'm your host, Kat Kozad, manifestation and money mindset expert, and I'm so happy you're here. Let's fucking do this thing. Comparison and comparing myself to other people was quite literally something that used to plague my life when I was growing up. I grew up, as many of you know from listening to the podcast, in a very small community in Colorado, and I constantly was comparing myself as well as being compared to the girls that I associated myself with. And I formed my perception of worth in large from the way that my body looked compared to theirs, the way that their families had money and mine didn't, their overall family dynamics that my family didn't seem to have, as well as the comparison that I received from a lot of teachers growing up, a lot of adults in the community based off of my appearance and, again, my own family dynamic. And through this, what felt like never-ending comparison game, I developed a very strong underdog mentality. And from that underdog mentality, I felt like I needed to compete. I felt like I needed to prove myself. I felt like I needed to fight for my space in every single room that I walked into. And I would try to overcome all of the circumstances that I feel as though I was an underdog in by comparing myself to other people and competing with those other people and look at their lives and base my worth and base my success off of whether I was doing quote unquote better than them, whether I was making more money than them, whether my skin was clearer than theirs, whether I was more perceived as happy than they were, so on and so forth. And once I was capable of achieving a lot of that, I then would look to people who I deemed as further ahead of me and do everything that I could to draw myself closer to having a reality like theirs, and almost created that as a new competition, that I was working to be at the same level as people that I would put on the pedestal. And this kept me in a very toxic cycle of achievement. This kept me in a very toxic cycle of never enough. This kept me in a very toxic cycle of feeling as though my worth was dependent on what was external from me than what is here internally inside of me. And I want to talk about this on the No Bullshit Manifestation Show today, about no matter where you're at or what your life looks like, what you've accomplished, what you have, be, or do, how to accept what it's like to stay in your own lane and know that that is enough. And like I said, that is largely what we're going to be talking about on today's episode, is learning how to stay in your own lane, learning what it means to be in your own lane and stick to your own lane and know that your own lane is enough. But before we dive into that, I want to let y'all know that I am currently accepting applications for one-to-one coaching clients. recently it was brought to my attention by one of the listeners on the podcast that y'all don't even know that I do one-to-one coaching. And for that reason, I wanted to open up a few coaching spots for private clients to be able to come on board and do some very intimate, very powerful one-to-one coaching with me. And so I've decided to open up 3 coaching spaces. These coaching spots are for the woman who is looking to elevate in all aspects of her life without the hustle and without the grind. This is for the woman who is looking to create true soul-fulfilling abundance and fulfillment in her life, and someone who is willing to really learn to soften and step into their feminine while still being an incredible, powerful source of energy and inspiration in her day-to-day life. So these coaching spots typically go super quickly, and I would love to have a conversation with you if this is something that you are interested in. So if you are interested in becoming a one-to-one private client, please shoot me an email at hello@katkozad.com. That will be down below in the show notes. From there, I will send you an application so we can see if this is the perfect fit for you. But before I even send over that application, I would love for you to shoot me an email and let me know that you are interested, because these spots are truly and only for someone who's ready to take the coaching experience very seriously. Not meaning that it's not going to be fun or that there isn't going to be lighthearted, incredible energy that goes on in it, but these one-to-one spots are for somebody who's willing to take coaching very seriously. So if you are interested in becoming a one-to-one client, like I said, shoot me an email at hello@katkozad.com. I highly suggest going and looking at the show notes for that because I keep fucking it up. But with that being said, let's dive into breaking free of the comparison cycle. So how does one even start to break free of the comparison cycle? If you listen to the podcast, if you've been a coaching client, you know I talk about this all the time. I think I literally talked about this like 2 podcast episodes ago. But the first place that you must start when you're starting any sort of journey to create change is the awareness and radical responsibility for the part that you are playing in this. Because it's easy to feel like the victim to something when in reality, whatever is happening in our lives, we are playing an active role in. And it's important to understand what story you are consciously and or subconsciously telling yourself about being a part of this comparison cycle, because whether you're aware of it or not, there is some part of you that is benefiting from it. There is some part of you that is benefiting from you actively being in the comparison cycle, and that is why you continue to stay in it. And just like I shared at the beginning of this podcast episode, some of my experience and my story with this is because I want to accurately illustrate for you the fact that I was benefiting from being in the comparison cycle. Although it felt like shit, and although it kept me in a toxic cycle for longer than I'd like to admit, I was still benefiting from it. I was using it as a source of motivation to go after more of what I wanted in my life. It was in some way benefiting me. So therefore, my brain latched onto it as an effective and positive way for me to continue to create change. And I want to talk about that for a second. When I say positive, there's what we like to call positive associations and negative associations. So positive associations are things that may carry a meaning or a connotation of something that is positive or negative, like comparison. A lot of times somebody would look at that and deem it as negative, but because it is benefiting you in some sort of way, your brain will have a positive association with it. Whereas a negative association, there could be something that you could look at and say like, oh, that's such a positive or a good thing, like taking a break from social media or eating all your veggies, going to the gym, whatever it may be. But if there's a part of your brain that has a negative association with that, then your brain will hold you back from doing it, even though consciously you know that it's something that you should do and you want to do in order to move the needle forward and get to the place that you want to be with it. So taking this back to the comparison cycle, because you are finding yourself in the comparison cycle, that means that your brain has some sort of positive association with comparing yourself to other people, to other lifestyles, to somebody's finances, whatever it may be, wherever you're finding yourself really stuck in this comparison cycle. So again, instead of just being like, ugh, I don't want to be there, I don't know why this is happening, there's nothing that I'm benefiting from this, whatever it may be. Yes, you are benefiting from it in some way, and you don't have to anymore. There is a way to change it. There is a different association that can be made that can create this shift, and we're going to dive into that. But again, it's really important to understand the things that we dislike in our lives, the things that we have those associations with, we continue to do because there is some part of us that feels like we are still benefiting from this. So, like I said, from my example, I was benefiting from it in the way because it was motivating me to make more money, to clear up my skin, to get a better apartment, to XYZ, whatever it may be. For you, it could be something else. And I highly encourage you to take a moment, whether it be right now or after you finish listening to the podcast episode, to reflect on, how am I benefiting from this? Like, what benefit am I truly getting from this? Because there is some sort of benefit that I am getting from this. And once you understand what it is, then you can start to create a level of acceptance for the fact that you have been benefiting from it, and it's something that you don't need to shame or guilt yourself for. Because oftentimes, one of the things that we tend to do when we're moving towards healing and removing limiting beliefs and changing habits and behaviors and whatnot is we'll identify whatever it is that mentally we deem as unsupportive, but we've had this positive association with, and then we'll get frustrated with ourselves. We'll beat ourselves up, be our own worst critic, and that really doesn't benefit you in any sort of way. So instead of falling into that narrative of like, oh God, like that's so annoying, or I'm so upset with myself, or whatever it may be, it's really just creating this radical acceptance of like, yeah, I was doing that. Is it good that I was doing that? No. Is it bad that I was doing that? No. It is what it is. It's inherently neutral. It's okay that I was doing that. I'm creating radical acceptance for myself for doing that, because that allows you to truly meet yourself where you're at. And instead of trying to convince yourself that you should be somewhere else when you're not actually there, meeting yourself where you're at, full radical acceptance for it, allows you to actually bring yourself back into alignment and allows you the opportunity to shift from that position. So once you've created this radical acceptance for yourself, then allow yourself to, if it's there, sit in the discomfort of choosing to approach situations differently than you normally would. So what do I mean by this? When you are moving from one way of being, one system of operation to another in your life, so going from constantly being stuck in the comparison cycle to moving to a state where you are not engaging with comparison, you are choosing to put the phone away or exit a conversation or whatever it may be when you feel that desire to compare yourself with somebody else or some other circumstance, and allowing yourself to sit in the tension and the discomfort of that. Because in order for us to get to the next level, in order for you to create that change, it's going to require you to show up differently than you have in the past. And oftentimes a lot of people aren't capable of moving through that threshold because they have such an adverse reaction to discomfort that they continue to play out the same cycles from the past, even though they know that they aren't supportive for them, as opposed to really allowing yourself to buckle down into the discomfort of whatever may be coming up for you by choosing a different thought pattern, by choosing a different action, by choosing a different behavior, by choosing to proceed differently than you have in the past. Because that is going to allow you to, the way that I like to see it is like move through that wall that has been in place, that has been holding you back in those old patterns. And the only way through it, the only way to get to the other side is by allowing yourself to experience that tension and experience that discomfort and really not see it as something bad or wrong, but instead see it as something that is actually benefiting you and moving you forward. And quick rant on that is that I've talked about this a few times on the podcast, but the reason that we as humans fear or avoid discomfort so intensely is because back when we were cavemen, discomfort was typically followed by something dangerous. And if you weren't paying attention to and then course correcting from that feeling of discomfort, then you potentially were going to be put in a dangerous situation that could end up having your life be ended. Whereas now, the things that create discomfort for us are typically not life-threatening, but our brains haven't evolved as much as we would like to think that they have away from that same primal instinct to discomfort. So when you're experiencing that discomfort, your brain's having the same sort of reaction of like, oh, fuck, I need to get away from this, as opposed to learning how to train your brain to recognize that discomfort is actually something that is typically moving you closer to where you want to be, and that it's safe for you to sit in the discomfort of what it's trying to move you further away from. And this is why you on the podcast have heard me talk so much about creating internal safety, because creating internal safety is truly key for you to move from any old way of being, any old operating systems, any unsupportive limiting beliefs that have been holding you back into a new state where you are creating habits, behaviors, mindsets, etc. that are going to support you. Because when you're feeling safe internally, it allows you to handle the pressures and the discomforts and whatnot that are happening due to external circumstances in a much more efficient and effective way. And this internal safety really helps you get into the place as well that you're staying in your own lane. You don't feel as though you need to compare yourself to other people because you feel safe inside of your own skin and what you're experiencing on a personal level. And for me, this is truly what broke the cycle of comparison, was learning how to create that internal safety inside of myself. Because when I was constantly comparing myself to other people and then changing who I was, how I was doing things, the level of success that I was creating, etc., it was because I didn't feel safe as who I was and the way that I was as that version of myself. And that in order to feel safe, it meant that I needed to compare myself to other people and then compete with them and try to change who I was and how I was doing things and the money I was making and so on and so forth. And ultimately, at the end of the day, a lot of the reason that we choose to act in habits or behaviors that don't necessarily serve us is because we think that that is what is going to keep us safe. Kind of like I was talking about earlier, you have this positive association with comparison because that positive association in some way, shape, or form is keeping you safe. But if you can learn to cultivate that internal safety And know that regardless of what other people are doing or saying or the judgment that you're receiving or whatever it may be, that you are good, you are safe, you are worthy to your core just because it's not in question. You were born worthy and you will always be worthy. Then that allows you to quiet the noise of what in the past you felt as though you had to pay attention to, because it's safe for you to stay in your own lane and do you and live your life without the need to compare it to other people. So when it comes to creating internal safety, I've talked about this a lot on the podcast before, so if this is a new concept to you, go scan through all of the different podcast episodes that I've done on this. But one really important thing to note and notice with this is that this internal safety truly comes from a few things. First one being recognizing the limiting beliefs that you have that tell you that it's not safe for you to be you, or it's not safe for you to live and exist in your body in whatever way that may show up for you. Like I shared, this in large came from my physical appearance for me growing up and felt as though it actually wasn't safe for me to be inside of my physical body. And therefore, from that position, so many beliefs and behaviors manifested in terms of trying to protect me and keep me safe from being in my physical body. But once you can identify those limiting beliefs and the patterns and behaviors that you act within that are trying to keep you safe or tell you that you are not safe, then you have the ability to start to heal from those things. And as you start to heal from those things, you will start to develop more of a sense of safety inside of yourself to be able to approach the next level things, such as those discomforts, the uncomfortable emotions, the traumas, the stagnant energy that lives and exists inside of your body. And that really uncovers a whole new layer of healing, which I've also talked about on the podcast surrounding somatic healing. And that's one of the things that we do inside of the Abundant AF Babe Academy, as well as my one-to-one coaching container. And with all of that being said, what I want to do right here and right now is give you a simple practice that you can do to start to cultivate internal safety inside of yourself, because I know that joining the Abundant AF Babe Academy or joining my one-to-one coaching program isn't accessible to everybody, but starting to create this internal safety inside of yourself right now is. So if you're driving, don't do this. But if you are in the position that you are not operating machinery, or you are able to take a step back, sit down, and be with yourself, then you can do this right now. If not, I highly suggest that you come back to this later and actually do this, because I know a lot of the times we hear things on podcasts or audiobooks or whatever it may be, and we're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna come back and circle back and do it, and then you just don't. So if you do anything with your day today, I highly suggest that you come back and do this if you're not able to right now. But what you want to do is find the place, probably in your home, that you feel the most safe. And if it's not in your home, then finding it elsewhere. But finding that place that you feel the most safe. For me, this is my bed. So going to my bed, allowing myself to get all cozied up, blankets on top of me, super comfortable. And once I'm in that state, I'll put my hands over my heart space, over my heart center, and I will say to myself in my head, I am safe. I am safe to be here. I am safe to feel this. I'm safe to be in my body. I am safe. Because the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined. So when you are in that space that you feel the safest, and you are then reciting safety affirmations to yourself, you're going to start to send these signals to the subconscious mind that you are in fact safe, and start to actually feel the physical sensations, the physiological response to safety. And really paying attention to, getting close to and aware of what that safety feels like so that you are priming your brain and your body to be able to get back to that state more often, which then with time, consistency, and practice in this, you are able to conjure up and cultivate that feeling of safety inside of yourself, regardless of where you are. You don't have to be in your bed, but when you're first starting this work and you're really starting to recognize, like, when do I actually feel safe? It's best and it's easiest for you to find that space that you truly do feel the safest, whether that be in the shower, your bed, your car, with it not moving, out in nature, whatever it may be. Going to that space and using these safety affirmations, doing this as often as you possibly can. I highly suggest doing it every single day, if not twice a day, if you are capable of doing that, because the more that you do, that's going to start to send signals to your subconscious mind that you are becoming safer and safer. And the more safe that you become, the more that you'll be able to expose any of these things that have not been serving you, but you've been holding in place as a false safety mechanism, such as comparison, and start to weed through and get rid of those things, which will ultimately allow you to stay in your own lane. And I know that there's probably so many resources out there that are like, here's the 3-step process, quick fix to ending the comparison cycle, or whatever it may be in the healing journey. And I think that those things can be valuable, but anytime you're listening to the No Bullshit Manifestation Show, anytime you're having a conversation with me, it's not going to be a quick fix, because I'm focused on helping you create long-lasting, sustainable results inside of your life, inside of your manifestations, inside of your finances, inside of your healing, inside of everything that you do. Because when you can take the long-lasting, sustainable route to whatever destination you're trying to get to, it will allow you to actually remain there, as opposed to continue to conjure up all of this work over and over again and feel as though you're just spinning on this hamster wheel with it never actually ending. And one thing I will say is that if anything from this podcast episode has resonated with you, then I highly, highly suggest sending me an email about one-to-one coaching, because this is where we can create such massive transformation in your life by helping you fully create that internal safety through subconscious reprogramming, through somatic healing, through nervous system regulation, and through so many other things that will create that long-lasting, sustainable change. So that is what I have for you on today's podcast episode. That is how you end and break free of the comparison cycle. I hope that this was helpful for you, and I will chat with you on the next podcast episode. I'm sending you all of my love.